I'm Ben Falk. I'm a director of insights at EYQ, which is EY's global think tank. And today I'll present you with a framework to think about the disruptions that are happening in money markets and in cryptocurrencies. And so I think by now you all know money performs three social functions. Money stores value, money exchanges value, and money measures value. And for as long as anyone can remember, these three functions were bundled together into a single instrument. But actually, if you go far enough back in history, that wasn't always the case. And typically, in medieval times in particular, societies relied on multiple instruments to serve what are really a diverse and sometimes conflicting set of needs. And so I'll walk you through three recent case studies that illustrate how money is being unbundled by these financial technologies. And so first we'll take a look at Bitcoin, which is the one I think everyone's most comfortable with. Bitcoin, of course, has a fixed number of tokens released on a preset schedule, and so it's engineered to be artificially scarce. And scarcity is, of course, an attractive feature in an asset, in a store of value. Think beach houses in Malibu. And to be sure, most interest in Bitcoin is speculative, with demand from retail investors, institutional investors, and hedge funds. But 13 years after its creation, almost no one is using Bitcoin to exchange value or to measure value. And so the question is why? And the answer is because when you have a fixed quantity of something, the only adjustment mechanism is the price to changing circumstances, to changing demand. And so that adjustment mechanism means that Bitcoin is extremely volatile, and volatility is a really undesirable feature in a currency or in a unit of account. And so in the early days, Bitcoin suffered from what technologists call poor product market fit. It was marketed as a currency, as a medium of exchange, but its governance and design was really better suited to storing value rather than exchanging it. And so this poor fit led to conflicts within the Bitcoin network. Some members of the community wanted to make changes that would make it better suited to exchange purposes. No agreement was reached, and ultimately what happened is a sub-network broke away. They duplicated the Bitcoin blockchain with what's called a hard fork, and they unbundled what they called Bitcoin Cash, and leaving Bitcoin proper as the store of value function. And so central bankers, in the context of CBDCs, would recognize this trade-off that the Bitcoin community faced very, very well. They frequently surmise it in what's called Bagehot's dictum, which is a monetary policy-making heuristic from the 17th century, named after the British banker and economist Walter Bagehot. And it was actually cited by Ben Bernanke in 2008 during the Lehman crisis. And so you might remember from your Econ 101 classes a production possibilities frontier, a PPF. And usually denoted with guns and butter on the two axes. And what happens is technology advances and it pushes out the production possibilities frontier, and it allows society to produce more of both guns and butter. Well, any issuer of money faces a very similar trade-off, and you can model it as a policy possibilities frontier. There are different features that make a useful store of value relative to a medium of exchange. And central bankers, particularly in times of crisis, are forced to trade off these two features against one another. And so what's happening with fintech and crypto is the policy possibilities frontier is being pushed out. The Bitcoin experience shows that monetary policymakers can now better satisfy both constituencies, perhaps by offering two complementary instruments rather than relying on just one. And so a lot of people ask, what's the market failure that CBDCs are designed to address? I think that's the wrong framing. Actually, what this technology will do is allow them to do their existing jobs much better. And so if we explore these expanded policy possibilities a little bit more detail, we move to China to look at their digital currency electronic payments mechanism. And so as David mentioned, they recently conducted a series of experiments in a bunch of cities across China, including in Shenzhen. And what they did is allowed residents to apply to a lottery via a digital app. And some residents received red packets of e-yuan. Now, these balances could not be transferred to your bank account, so they couldn't be saved. They couldn't be gifted to anyone else. they could only be spent at a certain number of retailers for a period of 90 days. And if you didn't spend it during those 90 days, the balances expired. So they effectively carried an implied negative interest rate. And the reason the PBOC set this condition on the trial is because they wanted to make sure everyone used the tokens and therefore tested the infrastructure. And indeed, spend they did. About 95% of the balances allocated were used to purchase goods and services during the test. And so what the PBOC really created is a variety of money that is not a very good store of value because it decays and expires, but it's still a useful medium of exchange. So they unbundled the medium of exchange functionality in money. And actually, this is another really old idea. It first originated with this rather eccentric gentleman named Silvio Gesell, who John Maynard Keynes called an unduly neglected monetary profit in his tome, The General Theory. And his ideas have actually resurfaced recently, mentioned by Stanley Fischer, by Ben Bernanke, by Mario Draghi in recent years, because his ideas were posthumously implemented in a small Austrian town of Virgil in 1932 in the midst of the Great Depression. And what they did is they created a community currency that depreciated in value every month. It lost a little bit of its value. And the result for this small town was a sharp rebound in economic activity, in investment, and in employment, while the rest of the country was mired in the Great Depression. And so an instrument like this, that is useful as a medium of exchange but not a store of value, is a really attractive instrument to central bankers because it's much more stimulative in terms of economic activity. And so China's experiments in the spirit of Gesell are demonstrating that these powerful new varieties of unbundled money are technically feasible, and it really indicates that monetary policymakers are not out of ammunition yet, despite what you hear a lot. And digitization actually increases their firepower. It gives them a better ability to respond to additional macroeconomic shocks in the future, even while they're at or near the zero bound on interest rates. And so we've seen how financial technologies are enabling the creation of unbundled varieties of money that either store value or exchange value. But we can also strip out the third role, which is a unit of account. And this has happened frequently in the past. So what you see up there is the medieval French livre tournois, which is a unit of account, but not a medium of exchange or a store of value. No livre tournois were ever minted, and in fact, the tokens that were dominant in circulation at the time were foreign minted coins, the Florentine florin and the Venetian ducat. And so this variety of money served as a unit of account, but not a medium of exchange or a store of value, what they called an accounting currency, simply a fiction that enabled advanced forms of economic activity. And so today's equivalent are stablecoins, the dominant unit of account in the DeFi ecosystem, the largest of which, of course, are Tether and USDC. And these tokens are not good stores of value. Their price is stable, meaning you can't achieve capital gains with them. They pay no interest, generate no income. Both of those are attractive features in assets and stores of value. They're also not good currencies. No retailers accept them in exchange for goods and services. And so that leaves the unit of account functionality as the legitimate backbone of stablecoin demand. And without question, stability is an attractive feature for accounting purposes. And so in providing this service, stablecoins, along with smart contracts, enable the complex financial transactions we call decentralized finance, or DeFi. But there's a hidden cost here. Economists typically theorize that the reason private agents coordinate around the same unit of account is because our balance sheets overlap and interact. My asset is your liability, your credit is my debit, and vice versa. And that means risks can spill over, materializing risks can spill over and have knock-on effects onto other actors in the economic system. And so what that means is, because of this interlocking effect, this creation of systemic risks, accounting currencies have to have very, very strong governance, because otherwise there's always an incentive to fiddle with the accounts. And unfortunately, we see that stablecoin governance at the moment looks pretty weak. Policymakers are beginning to recognize the systemic risks that are emerging in decentralized finance, and they're racing to catch up. And indeed, some central banks have a preference for strongly regulated private stablecoins in lieu of a central bank digital currency. And so what this analysis shows is that cryptocurrencies are decidedly evolutionary. None of ledger money, tokenized money, private money, or digital money are new, and indeed 3 of the 4 of them are ancient. What is new is that money is decentralized and autonomous, that the ledger is distributed across a network of computers, and transactions occur algorithmically, independent of any direct human input. And so the key question this raises is, what is gained with decentralization? What is the added benefit from going decentralized? And if we figure that out, we'll go a long way towards understanding why crypto is in such strong demand. And for the answer, we can turn to the head of research at the BIS, a genius named Hyun-Sung Shin, who's been studying decentralized consensus mechanisms for about 30 years, well before blockchains were even invented. And he recently published a paper that modeled the welfare benefits of a decentralized versus a centralized financial system. And what he found is that decentralization is only optimal when the rule of law is weak, when contract enforcement is imperfect. And so it's no coincidence that the last decade we've seen, when crypto has emerged, we've seen a sharp decline in trust in incumbent financial institutions. According to Edelman, the financial sector is one of the least trusted sectors in the economy. It's at the bottom of the list, at or near the bottom of the list every year. And this is probably for good reason, because we've had Bernie Madoff, who's up there on the screen, ISDA fix, commodity market manipulation, mortgage securities fraud, the Panama Papers, and the LIBOR scandal, which MIT finance professor Andrew Lo called the biggest financial scam in history, $1 trillion skimmed off the top. The list of proven, demonstrable rent-seeking behavior in the financial sector continues to grow. And so in my opinion, this largely explains why so many people are taking so much risk with these unproven instruments that are frequently issued by poorly governed entities. Cryptocurrency adoption is a symptom of institutional decay. Accelerated disruption is the cost of Madoff's and others' financial crimes, most of which went unpunished. And so if you read through the crypto white papers that come with these token offerings, including the original by Satoshi Nakamoto up here, they typically note that the goal is to obviate the need for a trusted intermediary to review transactions. And so what you're seeing is the technology sector is entering financial services not only because it's so lucrative, but because they see the market opportunity given the deteriorating trust in incumbents. And so they're relying on a really well-established tech startup attack strategy, going after one product or service in the bundle rather than all three. And so it's worth remembering that money is an information good, right? It's just data, in the words of Elon Musk. It's nothing more than strings of ones and zeros, like any digital media or software. And so it's logical that these startup attack strategies apply here as well. But also, like other information goods, money benefits from network effects. The more people that accept an instrument, the more valuable it is. And it's this feature that explains why most privately issued currencies fail through history. It's just really hard for a private entity to compete with the network of a central bank. But the tech giants entering this fray with Meta and Diem or Libra, whatever it's called, they have a built-in network of billions of users globally, and so they immediately overcome this network constraint. And that means this is now a threat to monetary sovereignty, to the monopoly supply of currency that is currently held by central banks. And so in response to this emerging competitive threat, they're now exploring issuing their own instruments called CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies. And there are really a wide number of design choices available, and the ultimate adoption will depend on the local political, legal, and institutional characteristics of various jurisdictions. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. There are two dominant models that are currently being explored. One is a wholesale model, and one is a retail model. Wholesale models target a medium of exchange functionality, a currency functionality. Retail models target a store of value functionality. Wholesale models are going to come first in the next 2 to 5 years, and retail models will come later, probably 5 to 10 years down the road. But really, solving the supply side of the equation is the easy step for central banks. Simply offering a new instrument doesn't mean that people will use it, no matter how well designed it is. So they also have to figure out the demand side of the equation. They have to get people to adopt these tokens. And that means that CBDC issuance is really likely to be accompanied by a trust-building exercise in the traditional financial system. They need to demonstrate to the consumers that are defecting to this new ecosystem that the old infrastructure not only works and is more efficient and more cost-effective, but also that it can be trusted again. And so luckily for governments, the digitization of money markets with CBDCs ensures much greater transparency than you have with physical cash, where it's harder to trace transactions. And so, in my opinion, what's coming in the next few years is regulators are going to be cracking down much more strongly on not just the crypto and DeFi ecosystem, but also in the traditional financial sector. And that'll be part of a multi-pronged approach to demonstrate that this ecosystem can be trusted and to try and stem the defections away to the new decentralized finance. And so that means there's growing legal and regulatory liability risks for incumbent financial institutions in the coming years. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.